Can you talk more about this call to pursue diversity in the church? Can you maybe tell me, how do you do that intentionally? How do you pursue diversity intentionally?
Well, I grew up in a Black church, and I love the Black church, and it shaped me and formed me. I met Jesus in the Black church. When I moved from the South Side of Chicago to go to school, University of Illinois in Champaign, I was immersed in a place that was totally different from what I grew up. Very uncomfortable, it was very foreign to me. And so in the midst of all of that difference, the Lord gave me friends and gave me relationships that taught me to value difference, that exposed some blind spots, and birthed within me a desire to see the church be thoroughly integrated, right? Because the relationships that I built in those spaces gave me windows into worlds that I thought I knew something about, but I really didn't. More than anything, as I became friends with people who I had never, I grew up without any meaningful interactions with anybody other than Black people. And so prior to having friends in those various groups, those were just nameless, faceless people that I lumped together, right? It wasn't until I had some real relationships with different kinds of people that I began to see them as individuals and not just see and make allowances for their cultural and unique differences, but to value those differences, right? So when I couple that with my life in the kingdom of God, I feel like it has impacts on evangelism, right? Because all of a sudden I see people, I value them, and people who were previously ineligible to receive God's kingdom light and witness from me, because I see value in them now, they're now targets to receive that, right? Wow. And so I feel that is the very core of what we're supposed to be doing here in a diverse church. I can make a strong case for why churches who have access to diverse groups of people should pursue that, because I think it uniquely positions us to be people who really walk out the Great Commission.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. So I'm ruined for this. You can't pull me away from this. I've seen too much. I've experienced too much.
I love that.
And so how we do that is we understand that if we do not make space for difference won't come and stay. If we don't give away power to different looking people and give them the right an invitation to speak into who we are and who we're becoming, then we won't be setting the table for all the different kinds of people that we want to come. And so we were fortunate to be able to start with a diverse team and to start with a diverse mission and to move to a multicultural sort of community, a diverse city that was proud about that particular fact. And we've been able to grow from there. We started that way.
Yeah.
So, because that's been in our DNA, and that's been a value that we haven't strayed from. It's been fairly easy by comparison to just make that be who we are. It's just who we are. And so, we're talking about who has power in this organization, who do we want to show up, and how are we decreasing so that others might increase. And so
I love that so much. I just have so many questions about that, especially from a leadership perspective, because you're talking about, and I've heard other Vineyard pastors use similar language that you're using, like we give away power, or we give away, I'm trying to think how Reagan says it. Yeah, ministry. We give away ministry, like we give away big chunks of ministry. But what you're saying is like that becomes intentional when you are pursuing diversity, because you want to give away power to diverse voices. Is that what you're saying?
Well, giving away ministry is different than giving away power.
Okay, say more.
Giving away ministry, plenty of ministry to do. There's, ministry from preaching to cleaning toilets to watching children, right? Yeah. To me, that doesn't translate to power. Power speaks to whose no or yes wins the day, whose preferences decide who we are, how we are, or who gets respect, who doesn't get respect, how we spend money, what things we speak out for, who we become. So it's not hard to determine who has power. It's just who we are. And so, when we talk about who has power, it's not just, who has power, but it's who has power. And so, when we talk about who has power, it's not just, who has power, but it's who has power. And so, when we talk about who has power, it's not just, who has power, but it's who has power. And so, you, it's not hard to determine who has right? You
Yeah.
just figure out whose yes or no matters,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so from the beginning, since we started with a diverse core of people, and those people from the beginning have had the ability from their unique cultural background or socioeconomic background or racial background or generational background, have been given some institutional power to speak to who we become. That's what power looks like, right?
Wow.
And
Wow.
so,
And is that a board or a leadership team? How is that structured?
well, when you're starting a church plant team, not that the leadership is completely flat, but we started with 13 people, and there's so much of what we generate as our identity that comes from the unique perspectives and things that all those people bring to the table. So even before we talked about before we even begin to think about polity and hierarchy, that core people who were dreaming and scheming with us, their ideas and who they were. I mean, because those people make up your church. Our church was 13 people when we started, right? Those people just sort of organically make up what we care about, right? And who we're aiming at. It just so happened that they were intentionally diverse, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're thinking about our messaging and what we're going to say, I'm sharing a story or I'm preaching and I say something, and the brother who is a Puerto Rican on our team, he goes, "Hey man, I know you didn't mean it this way, but when you said that joke, this is how that landed on me from a Port." And I go, "Man, I had no idea." And does that make sense what I'm saying?
Makes
Or
so much sense.
the people who are white in our group, they say, "Hey, that event that we're going to do, or that joke that you told, or that illustration, here's how." So all along the way, who we are is being shaped by the people who have power and permission to speak into who we are. So as we grow and as we evolve, as we have staff and as we have leaders, these things are on our mind, right? And so we are just I think a homogeneous church, like any homogeneous organization, doesn't really have to think about the other. They don't have to think about the jokes they tell. I mean, all they have to do is make the people comfortable who are in the in group. It's harder for us because we just got to think about everything. There's been times where I've said to staff and key leaders, "Hey, this joke you posted on social media, you didn't consider how that's going to land on this particular ethnic group. We've worked too hard to be a place for everybody. I know your heart. I know you didn't mean anything, but you got to take that down," right? And so now some people would be outraged by that.
Yeah.
But I don't really care because this is who we said we were going to be, right? And so is posting that joke worth all the work we've done and the folks who might take that, who might take that the wrong way? A joke isn't worth that. So they gladly take it down and maybe make good on that. Maybe they have to issue an apology or something like that. But those are the extra things that come along with building the type of community that we've built over the years. And so it's work. So when something like this comes along, one, hopefully we've been doing the work along the way so that people have a box to put this in or a heart that breaks for it, but there is an expectation that it will be addressed somehow in some way. Maybe that's not always through the pulpit on a Sunday message, but this thing won't go over our heads. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Which is so beautiful because I think that's unique. I think most churches, at least in my experience, which my experience has been all outside the vineyard, but most people don't expect to hear their pastor craft this, like current event into the message. To me, that's such a tragedy, like that you're not going to hear about Ahmaud Arbery. Like your church is not even going to talk about it, I think, for a lot of churches. So I think to hear that your church has that expectation, like that seems like so encouraging to me.
Well, I just think that's who we've become,
Yeah.
For example, I don't think on the Sunday following this happening, I didn't say anything explicitly on Sunday morning, which I normally do, our format's a little bit different. We're online for our services and all that stuff, but on social media and there was a lot of activity because we were crafting that letter for, with the Black pastors in Vineyard USA, and just there's few thoughts and reflections that I put on social media. But so it was addressed. It didn't always have to be addressed in the same way, but many of our people reflected that it was meaningful to them that we chose to address it. So
yeah, I love that. The other thing that really strikes me is how much, like at your church, how much maturity and humility that it takes in order to continue to engage each other over the hard things. Like when somebody posts something or a joke is said in service, like there's something so sanctifying about having that conversation that says, hey, this is how I see that. That's really hurtful. And for that other person to have the chance to respond in humility and say, sorry, like, let's make it right.
yeah. Well, they don't always respond in humility. I just want to be on the record about that.
Not
So
always.
I can't control how people respond. I can, however, and I think part of what happens over time in a community like this is that you expect people to say hurtful things. You expect people to do ignorant things. You expect people to hurt and injure, most of the time unintentionally.
Yeah. But
this whole realm makes allowances for what I call humble ignorance, right?
Yeah.
So often, and this is what I heard you express in your intro video, that how I define, there's two types of ignorance. There is humble ignorance and there's arrogant ignorance, right?
Yeah.
The humble variety says, man, there's plenty of things I don't know. I'm not at all surprised that I don't know all there is to know about an entirely different culture or race.
Yeah.
I expect that I'm going to make mistakes, and I give people permission and license to lean in and correct me and to come talk to me if I'm traveling wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in a diverse community, people are getting hurt all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Inappropriate things are being said and done all the time. It's just that we have a commitment to say, hey, we're going to talk about that. And hopefully there is, the response is one of humility and not defense and blaming and justifying and excusing. Hopefully your disposition is, hey, listen, I had no idea. I did not intend to do that. I can see how that injured you. Hey, please forgive me. I'll try my best to make that never happen again. And I give you permission to lean into,
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Perfect.
And so there is, again, everybody isn't that flowing with, encouragement and a willingness to forgive, but that seems to be like the undercurrent of what goes through a healthy, multicultural, multi-ethnic community. And I'm pleased that we enjoy that. But I mean, we're 10 years in.
Yeah.
We've been left foot, right foot, left foot, building this for the last decade. And so I don't want to pretend that it came easy, but it certainly helps to have that baseline when something like this happens in the news.
Yeah.